Hello everybody, what's up gang? Welcome back to Kojimo's stream. Today we're going to be looking at recording and producing different guitars. We're going to look at acoustic guitars and electric guitars. We're going to look at mic choices, we're going to look at EQing, we're going to look at compressing, all the things you need to know for recording your own guitar sound and getting a good sound out of it. Let's begin. I've got a Gibson acoustic guitar, and it's got a really dark sound to it. The very first thing you should always think about with your acoustic guitars in particular is the sound that is coming off of the instrument. Some acoustic guitars are really bright, some of them are very dark. Some have a lot of sound coming from the body itself, and all of these different factors play a role in how you're going to set up your mic array. If you're going to use a single mic setup, then you're going to want your mic to be about a foot or so away from your guitar. So let me move, sorry about that, let me move your trumpet lab over to here. Cool. And I've got an SM57 here, and whole albums have been recorded on SM57. It's a pretty cost-effective microphone. It can be used for a lot of things. It has a very particular sound to it, super durable. So I wanted to show you guys recording, mixing with a 57, because you may be doing that someday. So is this, can you see this? Yeah, okay. So I know it's a little hard to get depth perception from this angle, but trust me, it's about a foot away from my guitar. A very common misconception is that you want to have your mic super close and right over the sound hole, because that's where the sound is coming from, right over the sound hole. But if you do this, you're going to have a very, very boomy sound, and it's not going to get those higher frequencies as well. It's not going to pick up any of the fret motion, and it's just not going to sound like a natural, good guitar sound. So yeah, we want it about a foot away. We want it slightly above center. And yeah. So this is our SM57. This is just your regular old mic that most people should have when they first start recording. I'm going to record a little bit of this so that when we go back later, we can EQ it. Alright, so that's our SM57, super basic. There's other ways that you can go about miking this as well with a single microphone. I'm going to show you two more, and we're going to record this over here so that we have some difference. So you can also put it down near this part of the body, which sounds a little counterintuitive because it seems like we're not really getting close to our strings, our fretboard, or anything. But this part of the guitar, this part, okay, is actually pretty resonant. It's the fattest part of our guitar, and it has a lot of frequencies that come through it, and it gives it a different type of tone quality. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna look at those things later. You also can do one more thing, and we'll look at that. We can aim it directly at the fretboard. kind of somewhere around the octave is best. So we'll get one more like this. Cool. All right, so that's our SM57. Now we're going to look at an AB pair, which is typically what I like to do. I also like to use my AB pair with a ribbon microphone and a small condenser microphone. I'm going to give you a little tip on taking off and putting microphones on the right way, because some people don't understand that. First of all, this has a very cool thing called a quick clip. And I'll show you what it is. It's basically a button right here that allows you to just press it in and take these off super, super quick. Now, fussing around with screwing them on and off, you screw in a one side of the clip onto the microphone clip itself, and then the other side onto the microphone stand. And that is a very cool little invention that better people than myself have came up with. So, something that you all should know is that a lot of people, when they're taking clips in microphones on and off the stands, they try to screw the wrong part. They'll like take the clip and they'll turn it like this, and that's like kind of a hassle and a bore. So what most of the professionals do is they loosen the arm and just twist from here, and it's so much faster and better to put on a mic. So with a real mic now, we've got our mic, we've got our clip. We're gonna put it into here, and instead of doing this weird way that's like hard to actually put on, we're gonna line it up, and then we're just going to turn the stand itself, which is way faster, way more efficient. So when I use an AB pair, I like to use this microphone in the same way that we were going to use our single mic setup. We want it centered, and we want it not over the soundboard. We want it like above center on the guitar, and we want it to hit kind of more where the bridge or the neck meets the body. Our second mic can get again, we want them to be roughly the same distance away from our sound source. So if you're sitting at an angle like this, then you can see that the distance from this mic is a lot farther than the distance from this one. So what we want to do is kind of move this back and angle it towards our fretboard. So now we can get the resonance from the fretboard and a lot of the finger movement and fretboard sound. Okay? Typically, people like to use small diaphragm condenser mics because they mirror the frequency response of your guitar. Your guitar roughly goes from a frequency about 80 hertz to 1200 hertz, and that's because a low E is 82.4 hertz. I think it's 82 point something, and your highest note up here is around 1190, something like that. So roughly 80 to 1200 hertz. And so when you're looking at mics, you want to look at the frequency response patterns of those mics and make sure that you don't have any dips in that area or jumps. So also they pick up transients a lot better. They pick up everything a lot better because they have an actual power source voltage feeding the diaphragm of the capsule in here, rather than just the pressure waves itself causing the current to flow. Okay, so enough of that. Let's record our AB pair. Excellent. So the last one I want to show you is an XY pattern. Okay, so an XY, we're going to use the same mics. It's just another way of getting the audio back. It's just another way of setting up the mics. I like XY pairs because they make it so that you don't have to worry about phase at all. This is called an XY because it makes a X pattern of the capsules. I'm going to show you with the camera. Where are we at? Okay. So, as you can see, our mics are overlapped in an X pattern. The capsules, which are located right here, that's where the actual diaphragm of the mic is. That's what gets moved when sound waves hit it. And as you can see, the capsules are right on top of each other, so you can't have any phase issues. The sound source is the sound waves that are being emitted from the sound source are going to hit those mics at the exact same time because they are in the exact same place or as close to it as possible. So the other thing to realize about an XY pair is that you are getting total coverage from the source. Every microphone has what's known as a polar pattern or a pickup pattern that shows where the mic is actually going to pick up frequencies. Pretty much all small diaphragm microphones, you should always check what polar pattern your microphone has, but pretty much all small diaphragm microphones like this have what's known as a cardioid pickup pattern. So I'm going to pick this up again and show you. So basically, if we're looking at this top mic, the way that it's going to pick up signal is like this. Kind of like a heart-shaped pattern. It's not going to pick up much frequencies at all behind the mic. So if you look at both of these, one is going to come out this way and pick up all of the frequencies in this direction, which means that it's not going to pick up anything on the sides, right? Or it's not going to pick up as much as it does from the front of it. That's where the bottom mic comes in. It's picking up the sides that this mic is missing. That's why this combination works so well as a stereo pair. So now we can record. Same kind of thing with this. About a foot away from your sound source, which is your guitar. Slightly above center of the guitar. And that'll give you more of the air in the room sound as well as the guitar itself. And hopefully we won't get much boominess out of it either. Excellent. Cool. So those are our different ways of miking these. So, okay. So now we're going to quickly switch over to an electric guitar and record that. And then we can look inside these sounds and see how we're going to EQ and compress them. So, electric guitars, you can, when you're recording in a studio setting, you always have the option of just going into a DI and then into your patch bay, or going like I'm doing directly into my sound card. And I like to do that because then you have more control over what kind of sound you're going to get later. There's a bunch of amp modeling inserts that you can look at and basically just make your sound whatever you want, modeling any type of amp and switchboard, pedal board, whatever. But if you have your own sound that you really want to attain, say you have your own amplifier, you have like a really nice orange amplifier, and you've got your own custom switch pedals that you want to record, then what I'm would suggest for miking that amp is to use a ribbon microphone right over the cab of the speaker, and then a dynamic microphone at a 45-degree angle on the other side. I like using the AT4080, which is a phantom-powered ribbon microphone, and a SM7B, which is a really nice flat frequency response dynamic. And those in conjunction together give you a really true sound from your amplifier, and it will make it so that you don't clip very easily, because as we all know, amps get very loud. So, but what I'm doing is just having my guitar just go straight into my sound card, and we're going to be able to decide what kind of amp modeling that we're going to do in our mixing. It's just going to give us a lot more control. So let's record some of this. So yeah, let's just play through some of these, and we can listen to what we got. So this first one is an SM57 microphone, and it is in our central position. It's right over where the neck meets the body of the guitar, and it's about a foot away. This is our classic recording position. That's a pretty good sound. It doesn't have a ton of character to it. My acoustic guitar is actually a pretty dark sounding guitar, so that's a pretty clear representation of what it is. This is going to sound really good once we EQ and compress it. So this mic position is more over the body of the guitar, more towards this side of the guitar, which has a lot of different resonant frequencies. It's the fattest part of the guitar. So let's hear what that sounds like. Nice. That sounds actually fairly bright. We're not getting a ton of the a little bit of like the dark, maybe even boomy sound that this first one produced. That has a nice clear sound to it. This next one is more over the top of the fretboard. As you can hear, we're still getting some of the lower frequencies of that. What we're getting a lot of now is like the sliding on the guitar strings that our fingers are producing. And so none of them are, right or wrong. They're all used for different styles of music. And the SM57 is a mic that everybody should own. It's a really durable and useful microphone for many different situations. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our A-B pair. This was, as you can see in our comments, this was using the Schoeps CMC6 microphone, small diaphragm condensers. These should have a pretty good pickup pattern, and it's over both the body of the guitar and the fretboard, which will be really nice because we can pan these into two different, into getting like a wider stereo image, which is a great thing about the A-B pair. So let's hear how this sounds. Yeah, as you can see, because we're using the small diaphragm condenser microphones instead of the dynamic microphones, we have a much different sound. very bright. We're getting the best of both worlds, really, getting the nice natural fretboard and like slide sounds, as well as our body of the guitar. So I'm going to pan these now, left and right. Actually, I'm going to do it the other way, though. And we're going to be able to hear that in a more full version. That sounded like it was coming a lot from my right side, so I actually want to unsolo this one and listen in a little closely on this. Yeah. Okay, so you are going to get some difference in sound volume. Obviously, you can just tell that from the waveforms. This is because you are getting more resonance from the body of the guitar than the fretboard. So maybe when you're playing this back, you want to pan it a little differently. So maybe not all the way. Excellent. That's the best of both worlds. So this XY pair that we're going to listen to next is using the same microphones, just in a different configuration. This one should have really good stereo frequencies. As you can see, because the microphone capsules are right on top of each other, our waveforms are near identical. Cool, and let's pan that. Excellent. I love that really wide stereo image. When it's just singer-songwriter and you're just recording yourself playing guitar and singing, then this is great, because you only have two instruments, and if you're listening to somebody play that live, they're basically coming from just the same area. So you can have your vocals just right at the center, have your acoustic guitar spread, and it gives your sound more life. Let's go on to the DI now. This is just going to be a clean electric guitar. All right, that's about what I expected. This is really not my best playing, I'm sorry, but we will be able to hear what different modeling amps will sound like, different compression and EQ techniques, and it'll be totally serviceable. So I want to start with our SM57 because I think that we're going to get a lot of life out of the compression in this, and the same techniques that we're going to use here can be applied to the XY pair, and we'll do that afterwards. I'm going to use this first recording of the SM57 that we took. So there's a lot of debate whether you should EQ before compressing or compress before you EQ, and the real answer is both. You should, if you EQ first, then compress, then you should go back and do your EQ again. If you compress and then EQ, then you should go back and compress again. And you should always be monitoring these in the context of your full mix as well. So it doesn't really matter which one you start with. It's just what your preference is. I'm going to EQ before I compress. And so let's pull up our EQ plugin, just the regular 7-band EQ. Some things to keep in mind when you're EQing. Again, the guitar range goes from 80 Hertz to 1200 Hertz. Okay, that is the range from its lowest E, which is a frequency of 82.5, to its highest note of around 1190 hertz. So just roughly 80 to 1200 is a good number. And so there's some things we can do with this right off the bat. When I EQ, I like to do 2 EQs on my channel. One as a subtractive EQ and one as an additive EQ. That makes it so that our EQ isn't just going all over the place. It kind of keeps things more organized. And it allows us to isolate certain frequencies as well. So one of the things I want to do is just throw on a high pass filter right away. This can be done with a lot of different instruments, drums, bass, vocals. It just kind of allows your sound to breathe more. It takes out the sub frequencies. It takes out, it lowers the amount of other noises that you don't want to get into your mix. And so I want to bring my Q really sharp. And like we said, the lowest on the guitar is 80 hertz. So we can get rid of everything below 80 hertz. So we're just going to move this right to 78.2 is fine. So we're going to cut out all of that. And we can listen to that real quick too. Oh, need to solo RSM57. So this is with the EQ on. This is with it off. You might not hear a lot of that in context or in the mix. Sorry, isolated right now, but this really helps when you are. Actually, I'm gonna bring this in a little bit too because you can see it's kind of coming off. Also, the lowest note I was playing was not actually an E; it was an F sharp. So that's something to keep in mind as well if you know that. But when you have this in the mix with other instruments, what occupies the 80 hertz range as well? Kick drum, really low notes on the bass. So if you get rid of the frequencies here, then that's not going to cover up your other frequencies of those instruments and allow them to cut through the mix better. Another technique I like to do is called EQ sweeping. What that is we take one of these points and we bring it all the way up, bring in the Q super narrow, so it's a spike. And then we can move this left and right to isolate where our weird problem frequencies lie. So let's listen to that. So you can hear right there, we have a really weird nasal sound. I'm going to leave that for the yellow dot because I think there's going to be other you hear that? That's a really awkward resonant frequency that we just want to get out. So we want to take our gain and just pull it all the way down. And we're going to do the same thing with this. Yeah, it's almost like a whistle that happens. It doesn't matter what chord or anything I'm playing. It just has this weird out of tune note, and that's present even when our gain is down. And by eliminating these things, we can have a much brighter, crisper sound. We're going to try this one more time with our green node. That's another weird whistle. I'm just trying to isolate exactly where that is. Yeah, right there. Awesome. So the last thing that we want to do is to put a high shelf on this. This is going to add a little bit of... Oh, I'm sorry. We'll save that for our additive EQ. So that's what I like to do for my subtractive EQ. Now let's go to the additive EQ. So there's a lot of different things that you can do. Sometimes you don't even want to add anything to your EQ. Okay, if you have a really nice sound already, then don't mess it up. But if there's things that you feel are lacking when you listen to it, then that's when you want to add EQ. So before I do anything, I want to listen to my guitar and try and identify things that I feel are problems. So this doesn't really have a very thick sound. And for me, that kind of translates into what other industry professionals call presence. And if you feel like you're not getting all that presence out of your guitar, then you really want to up in around the 2 to 5K range. So I'm going to take this node, which is right at 2K, bring it up. And you can hear that we're getting some more of those mid-frequency sounds a lot better. Just let's hear it. This is without. And this is with. Without. And with. Okay. Another thing that I like to do with guitars is to bump this higher frequency range above 10K with a shelf. It kind of adds a little more airiness to our sound. It doesn't necessarily work with every sound, but let's experiment and see how it changes. Also, when you're boosting frequencies in your EQ, you don't really want to go past 6 dB because you start to warp out your other sounds as well. So this is with our plus 10. I'm gonna actually bring this over a little bit too. This is with, this is without. Just kind of adds a little more airiness to that sound. I kind of feel like we're unbalanced a little bit in our lower frequencies now. We're getting a lot of our high end and mid frequencies really punchy, which might be really good if that's the sound you're going for. If you want it to stand out from other instruments that are in the lower frequency range, then this is a great thing to do. But if you're a singer-songwriter and you only have your acoustic guitar to work with, then you might want to bring out some of these lower characteristics as well. And so if we boost around the 300 hertz range, then we can get a lot more body from our instrument. Excellent. So this is post our EQing. And this is before we EQ'd. With, without. Just a much brighter, more full sound. Okay, so now we've done our EQing, we're going to look at compression now. Compression is something that scares off a lot of people when they're new to doing engineering and mixing, because it's a little mysterious. It was kind of confusing for me as well. At its most basic definition, compression is just lessening the dynamic range of an instrument. Basically, what you do, the process of compression is you take the highest peaks of a sound and you lower the dB of those peaks, and then you can bring up the entire waveform as you see fit for the mixing. So what we're going to do is I'm going to select this again. We're going to come over to a compressor. There's 4 different types of compressors. There is tube, optical, FET, and I'm blanking on the last one. Voltage VCA. And they all have different characteristics. And I'm gonna do a compression video next time, and we will look into all those characteristics. But for now, I'm just going to pick one that I think is going to do good, which is this C1 comp. And so usually with acoustic guitar, what we want to do is a ratio of somewhere from 3 to 1 to 4 to 1. It kind of depends on what you're doing. And so I'm going to just, because the C1 compressor has like all these really minute details between 3 and 4, I'm just going to go with almost 3 1/4. That's fine. Typically what we want to do is have our threshold around let's say, well, we really won't know until we have our sound, but this is a good starting point. And we're gonna want a slow attack, because you can really hear with this that we have really hard transients, and a transient is just the very first instance of the sound on the waveform. I can show you that right now. So as you can see with our waveform, we have a lot of them look very similar, right? We have a very big peak right here, which is known as the transient or the head. And then when the sound starts to fall off, this is known as the tail. And if we have too quick of an attack time, then we cut off these transients, and it makes our sound a lot less natural, which is why we want a slower attack time. So I'm going to put it at around maybe 50. And then we want a really fast release time. So the release is basically how fast the compressor is going to compress the next waveform, and these are in milliseconds. So we want a fast release time so that it can go back and compress our next waveform as well. And maybe like 20 to 30. Kind of depends. So now we can listen in. So what this is doing is every time it goes past this peak, or this this threshold, every time it gets up here, it reduces the volume by 3.2 dB. And so what we want to do is to kind of bring our threshold just below the loudest points so that we can really get that compression. And then we can take this output and bring it up, which is the entire output of the guitar. All right. And so that is compression in EQ for the acoustic guitar. Basically, no matter what miking techniques you have, these are the steps that you should follow to make your acoustic guitar sound a lot better. So let's move on to the electric guitar now. The electric guitar has a lot of the same steps as far as EQ and compression go. But before we do the EQ and compression, I'm going to do some amp modeling so that we want to have our sound picked out for our electric guitar before we do any EQing and compression, because those different distortion effects or delay effects or anything like that is going to affect our frequency response, and we would just have to redo it again anyway. So you want to pick out your electric guitar sound first. So I'm just going to pick this so we can hear it. Cool. And I'm going to come to where is it's in harmonic. We have guitar sound, guitar amp. Let's go with guitar amp. So there's a lot of different amps in this. We can choose what kind of cabinet we want. We can choose what kind of like microphone it's going to model the pickup off, and the amp type. Bass, clean, drive, gain, things like that. So, of course, you want to decide what kind of sound you want before you get into it. And because it's going to work a little better with our compression later, I'm going to go for a more like distorted, high drive sound. So I'm going to come to drive, and really I want to have something that we can listen to while I decide which one I want to use. So this is just our clean amp sound. You can hear the difference already because this is our original recorded sound, and this is with the clean amp. So let's come to drive. See where edgy is. A little too edgy for me. Clean. I think I like just our regular drive sound. And let's look at our different cabinet options. I really like that already. What is this one? I think I really like this one. I think I'm going to go with that. It's got a dynamic mic on it. Let's try ripping. I don't like that. Kind of got rid of our stuff. Let's try condenser. No. RE20? I kind of like this 421. It's kind of got like a yellow card sound. Maybe turn the drive down a little bit. Up the treble. And the bass. Cool. I like that sound. And let's pick up some pedals along the way. I don't need a whole bunch of pedals or anything, so I'm just going to go to Guitar Stomp 2. Excuse me. So what do we want? I want to try this Lay D. I've had some fun with using this in some of my sessions. And it's kind of a cute looking pedal. Obviously too much feedback. Turn that down to the mix too. Cool. And what's another fun sound? Let's do I kind of like this wah wah, but it's a little hard to use with the automation. So yeah, let's do that. Cool. I like that sound. So as you can see, that's a vastly different sound than what we started with. And we did this just going DI into our mic or into our sound card. And we didn't have to have an amp or pedals at all. So just to reiterate what we started with, this is the sound we had before. And we turned that into this. Which are vastly different sounds. This is why you definitely want to have all of those effects figured out before you go into EQ and compression. So just to switch it up, let's do compression first before EQ, because last time we did EQ before compression. Because this is an electric guitar, not an acoustic, let's try the R compressor. We're going to do the same kind of thing. In between 3 and 4 is usually what you want. So I'm going to go with 4.01. And we want to turn this threshold about anywhere between 15 and minus 25. It's usually what you want depending on how much input you have. I'm going to change this to smooth. Again, long attack, fast release. Cool. So again, the whole point of the compressor, it's a little hard to understand at first because it's because if you're not compressing a lot, then you don't really hear what's going on. But what it does is it lessens the dynamic range of your instrument. So so that you have a more consistent volume throughout your entire track is essentially what we're trying to do with compression. So now we can go to our EQ, go to EQ 7, and let's listen in. We're going to do subtractive first and then additive. Same thing before we even begin. I know I'm going to want this high pass filter at around 80 and just cut it off because we don't need any of those sub frequencies. I'm also gonna, please tell me in chat if the levels are bad. It looks like I'll turn this down a little bit, and hopefully that's not too much. I want you guys to be able to hear me over the mix, obviously. Okay. Okay, so let's go through and we're going to do our EQ sweep again. You hear that? We just want to get rid of that. See ya. Really big whistle there. Awful. Alright, so that's our subtractive. Let's put on our additive. So again, before we do our additive EQing, we want to hear what kind of, what are we missing from our sound. And after listening to this a bunch, I can already tell that we need some body in the sound. So we're going to boost around 300 hertz. This is a little tricky with the wah pedal too, because the wah pedal essentially just changes your EQing, so it kind of does something like this, except with a cutoff. You see how our output is clipping here? We kind of want to bring that down too. Cool. Let's try bringing up some of this. And then I like to try the shelf as well. You know, I don't know if I don't think I like this. Let's just bring that back. Cool. All right. So those are the basics of doing our production side of compressing, EQing our electric guitar and our acoustic guitar. So just a quick recap for everybody. The guitar's range goes from 80 hertz to 1200 hertz. So keep that in mind when you're doing your EQ. Keep that in mind when you're choosing mics. Always look at the frequency response of your mic. It's so easy to just go online, type in what your mic is and frequency response, and it'll show you a chart of where it rolls off and where it gets boosted. So keep that in mind, 80 hertz to 1200 hertz. When you are doing acoustic guitar, it's really nice to mic in stereo if you want to be able to pan later. I suggest using an XY pair because the capsules are right on top of each other, making phase issues not relevant. If you're using a single mic, try and get it more towards the part of the guitar that is where the neck meets the body and slightly above center. Avoid miking right over the sound hole because that'll cause a lot of boominess. But also take into account what your guitar sounds like before you start miking. Listen to where on the body you are getting these frequencies from. This will help you train your ear, as well as make you have better, more effective decisions in how you're going to mic it. Keep in mind what you're trying to get from the guitar sound. What is the genre of your song? And do you want it bright? Do you want it punchy? Do you want it dark? Do you want to be able to hear a lot of the fretboard? Because that's going to decide where you want to place your mic. Keep it about 1 foot to 2 feet away. And that'll reduce the boominess as well and get you some of the nice room sound. When you are EQing, you want to do subtractive and then additive. You want to first put a high pass filter at around 80 hertz to get rid of the sub frequencies and any other weird room noise or anything that you might encounter, because like we said, the lowest note on the guitar is around 80 hertz anyway, so you're not going to be picking up anything below that from your guitar. You're only going to be picking up things that you don't want to record. So just put a high pass filter there, do an EQ sweep with your nodes, and find unwanted resonant frequencies with the spike, and just turn the gain on those all the way down. Then with your additive frequency, your additive EQ rather. So yeah, for presence, 2,000 to 5,000 hertz range. Don't boost more than 6 dB. About boost with a shelf, 10,000 and above for airiness and a little more room sound, and then boost around 300 for more body and warmth from your guitar. For compression, try to stick between a 3-to-1 or a 4-to-1 ratio, somewhere in that range. 3-to-1 is typically better for acoustic guitar, 4-to-1 for electric. You want the threshold to come down to anywhere between minus 15 and minus 25 dB. It depends on where your signal is actually getting to. But make sure that you're coming down. I'll just show you one more time. Make sure that you're coming down below where the peak is, because if you're up here, then it's not going to compress anything. So bring it down here, and then everything above this dynamic range is what's going to be reduced. So you want a slow attack to maintain the transients, and a fast release so that you can get more of the strumming. All right. Well, thank you for tuning in to my stream today. I hope to see you all next time. Thanks again.